Hey guys, tonight we are not traveling to ancient civilizations or sailing the high seas. No, tonight you are stepping into a quiet kitchen, perhaps sometime around the turn of the 20th century, or maybe even a little earlier. Forget the sleek, modern appliances you're used to. There are no bright electric lights humming overhead yet, no convenient outlets on the wall. The heat you rely on for cooking comes from something far more ancient and hands-on fire. And if you want toast for breakfast, that simple, crispy slice you might top with butter or jam today, you're going to have to work for it. Forget popping a slice into a slot and pressing a lever. Making toast back then was a manual, often fiddly process, involving open flames, hot metal, and a little bit of luck to avoid burning it to a crisp. It was a different world, even for something as seemingly simple as getting that perfect golden brown result. You probably won't survive this history lesson without feeling a deep appreciation for the simple electric toaster sitting on your kitchen counter, and perhaps the ease with which you acquire your morning carb fix. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in a kitchen that smells faintly of wood smoke, coal dust, or perhaps the distinctive odor of illuminating gas, depending on the time and place. The heart of the kitchen is the heat source, a large fireplace or hearth with an open fire burning, or a sturdy cast iron stove, heated by coal or wood, or possibly an early gas range. There are no electrical cords trailing anywhere, no plastic components. Everything is metal, wood, stone, and fire. Making toast in this environment required direct interaction with the heat source. One common method involved a long-handled fork, or a purpose-made toasting fork, usually made of iron or steel, with two or more tines at the end. You would skewer a slice of bread on the fork and hold it directly towards the open flames of the hearth or near the hot coals. Imagine the warmth radiating outwards, the flickering light of the fire dancing on the bread. You had to constantly turn and adjust the bread, moving it closer or further away to get an even toast, watching it like a hawk to prevent one spot from turning black while another remained pale. Sensory details the intense, dry heat on your face and hands, the smell of wood smoke, the visual of the bread slowly changing color, one side browning faster than the other, the feel of the long, sometimes heavy, fork handle in your hand. This method was simple in principle, but tricky in execution. Getting an even toast was difficult due to the uneven heat of the fire. You risked burning your fingers, dropping the bread into the ashes, the ultimate toasting fail, or ending up with toast that was blackened on the edges and still soft in the middle. Joke number one. Ah yes, perfectly toasted, except for this one part that is now a tribute to charcoal. Nailed it. Another method involved using metal racks or cages designed to hold slices of bread and be placed directly on top of the stove or near the fire. These could be simple wire frames that held a slice or two horizontally, or more elaborate hinged cages that could hold the bread vertically and be flipped over. You'd lay the bread on the rack or in the cage and position it over a hot part of the stove or near the fire. This provided slightly more consistent heat than holding it on a fork, but you still had to manually flip the bread halfway through to toast the other side. And vigilance was still required. Leave it for too long, and you'd still end up with a carbonized slice. Some might even try placing bread directly on a clean section of the hot stovetop, though this often resulted in a scorched, hard piece of bread rather than a properly toasted one. Before the widespread availability and adoption of electric toasters in the early 20th century, toast was typically made manually in homes using long-handled metal forks or various types of metal racks and cages specifically designed to hold bread slices over or near an open fire, a coal wood stove, or a gas burner. This is our mainstream historical fact, outlining the standard pre-electric methods. The type of bread used for toasting might also have been different. Bread then was often denser and perhaps baked less consistently than modern factory-produced loaves. Toasting it was a way to make it more palatable, give it texture, and perhaps make stale bread edible again. Our quirky tidbits, some historical cookbooks or household guides recommend specifically cutting bread for toasting to a certain thickness, or even slightly drying it out beforehand to achieve the best results with these manual methods. There was a whole subtle art to pre-electric toast prep. The result of these manual methods was often less uniform than we expect today. You might get toast that was darker in the center, lighter on the edges, or unevenly browned. It might have a slight smoky flavor from the fire, but it was toast, warm, crispy in places, and ready for a smear of butter. Historians debate the social accessibility and prevalence of toast as a regular breakfast food item across different economic households before the advent of electric toasters made it significantly easier and quicker to prepare. Was toast primarily a luxury item, more accessible to those with dedicated kitchen staff or well-equipped stoves? Or was it a common food item that simply required manual effort from anyone with a fire and some bread? This is our open scholarly debate phrase. Understanding who was eating toast and how often in the days before the electric revolution. Comparing these methods to a modern toaster is like comparing sending a letter by carrier pigeon to sending an email. It required direct effort, manual intervention, constant attention, and the results could be inconsistent. Joke number 2. You look at your unevenly toasted bread. Well, it's brown. In several places, success. There was no timer, no pop-up mechanism, no browning dial. Just you, the bread, the tool, and the heat source. Joke number 3. You drop your toast fork with a clatter. Oops, guess that slice is for the dog now. These manual, often imperfect, methods were the reality of toast making for centuries. They highlight the basic human desire for toasted bread and the inconveniences and inconsistencies inherent in achieving it using direct fire or stove heat. This common, everyday struggle created a silent demand, waiting for a new technology to provide a simpler, cleaner, more consistent solution. The stage was set for the arrival of electricity in the home. Making toast with fire or a hot stove was the way things had been done for generations. A skill, a process, a gamble against charcoal with smoke, heat, and uneven results. But a fundamental change was sweeping through the world, slowly but surely making its way from cities and factories into homes, bringing a new kind of power that would eventually change even the humble act of making toast electricity. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were an era of electrification. Electricity was already being used for industrial purposes and for lighting streets and public buildings. But gradually, the infrastructure of power generation and distribution began to expand, bringing this invisible force into private residences, first in urban areas and then spreading outwards. Imagine the wonder of seeing your street lit by electric lamps for the first time. A clean, bright light replacing the flickering glow of gas or oil. Having electricity wired into your home was a sign of modernity, a connection to the future. It was clean power, available on demand, without the soot and fuss of coal or wood, or the smell and risk of gas. You didn't need to light a fire to power a lamp or run a small motor. You just needed to flip a switch or plug something in once sockets became standard. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the significant expansion of electricity generation and distribution infrastructure, gradually bringing electric power from its initial uses in industry and street lighting into urban homes. A transformative change that directly enabled the development of entirely new types of domestic appliances. This is our mainstream historical fact, marking the arrival of this game-changing technology in the home. While electric lighting was the primary initial draw for many households to get wired, the potential of this new power source quickly became apparent for other purposes. Electricity could easily and relatively cleanly be converted into heat, or used to power small motors. This opened up a whole new world of possibilities for domestic chores and conveniences. Suddenly, tasks that required manual labor or reliance on the main stove's heat could potentially be done with a clean, electric appliance. Inventors and manufacturers began experimenting with using electricity for various household tasks. Electric kettles started to appear, heating water faster and more conveniently than on a stove. Electric irons replaced the heavy, stove-heated metal irons that had to be constantly swapped out as they cooled. Early electric fans offered a new way to move air. Remember our Victorian struggles with heat? And among these early experiments with converting electricity into heat for domestic use was the idea of making electric cooking appliances. Think about it, the stove was the center of kitchen heat, but it was large, slow to heat up for small tasks, and generated overall heat in the kitchen. Electricity offered the possibility of localized, instant heat. This was perfect for things like heating water, pressing clothes, and yes, making toast. Initially, having electricity in your home was a luxury, primarily accessible to wealthier households in cities where the power grid was first established. The cost of wiring a house and the price of the early appliances meant that this gentle revolution began in more affluent kitchens before spreading to a wider population over decades. The early electric outlets and wiring were sometimes cumbersome and even slightly dangerous by modern standards, often installed on the surface of walls. A quirky tidbit about early home electricity involves some of the unusual early appliances or uses people came up with. Beyond the now familiar items, inventors tinkered with electric egg boilers, heated blankets, vibrating massage machines, definitely quirky, and even early electric hairstyling tools. The sheer novelty of having this power available led to a wave of inventive, sometimes bizarre, gadgets hitting the market, all trying to harness this new force for domestic convenience. Imagine an electric oyster opener. There's joke number one. Yes, it's electric. I'm not entirely sure what it does, but it plugs in and sometimes makes a noise. Progress. The potential of electricity to generate clean, controllable heat without the smoke, soot, or open flame risks of fire or gas made it particularly appealing for kitchen tasks. While a full electric stove was a larger, later innovation for most, smaller heating appliances were among the first to find a place in the electrified home. Historians debate the primary motivations that drove early domestic electrification. Was it the desire for brighter, cleaner electric lighting that convinced most households to wire their homes, with the potential for appliances being a secondary benefit? Or was the promise of labor-saving and convenient electric appliances like irons, kettles, and toasters a significant or even primary driver for many urban families to adopt electricity once lighting was already common? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, understanding what truly motivated households to embrace this new power source. The arrival of electricity in the home was a quiet revolution in itself. Changing the fundamental way people accessed power and heat, it set the stage for a wave of new inventions designed to make daily life easier, cleaner, and more convenient. Joke number two. You see an early electric iron. No more hot coals, just a heavy piece of metal attached to a wire. I'm sure this is perfectly safe. And among these new possibilities, inventors began to focus on a specific, humble task that had always required manual heat management: making toast. Joke number three. You imagine an early inventor. Fire too messy, gas too smelly, but electricity. Electricity could make toast cleanly and perhaps slightly less burnt. The clean, controllable heat of electricity was waiting to be harnessed for the perfect slice. Electricity was arriving in homes, a clean, mysterious power ready to be harnessed for light. While electric lighting was the first widespread application that truly captured the public imagination, the minds of inventors and engineers quickly turned to another fundamental need in the home, especially the kitchen generating heat, cleanly and conveniently from this new energy source. The basic principle was understood from early electrical experiments when an electric current flows through a material that resists its passage. It generates heat. This is called joule heating or resistive heating. The challenge was turning this scientific principle into practical, safe, and durable appliances for everyday use in the home, particularly for something like cooking food. Starting in the late 19th century, inventors and nascent electrical companies began experimenting with using this resistive heating effect for various domestic applications. Their goal was to create appliances that could provide localized heat for specific tasks, offering an alternative to the large, slow to heat, and often messy main stove or hearth. They envisioned a future kitchen where heat was available instantly, just by flipping a switch. These early experiments led to a range of rudimentary electric heating devices for the kitchen, far beyond just the toaster that would come a little later. There were early electric hot plates, essentially a heated surface for placing pots or pans, offering a single cooking zone. Inventors tinkered with electric kettles, aiming to boil water quickly without a stove. You saw early attempts at electric coffee percolators or rudimentary ovens. Imagine a small, exposed coil of wire on a ceramic base, intended to heat a pot of water. Sensory details the visual of a bare wire starting to glow red hot, the feel of the radiant heat emanating directly from the element. Perhaps the faint smell of dust or manufacturing residues burning off the first time it's used. Compared to the complexities of designing a full electric stove or oven that could reach and maintain high temperatures for baking or roasting, making toast seemed like a relatively straightforward application of electric heat. Toasting bread requires direct, radiant heat to brown the surface, a task well suited to the immediate heat generated by an electric element. It didn't require sustained high temperatures or complex heat distribution like an oven. However, before truly reliable electric heating appliances could become widespread, inventors faced a significant hurdle finding the right material for the heating element itself. Early attempts might have used iron or platinum wires, but these had major drawbacks. Iron would rust and degrade quickly when heated repeatedly in the presence of air oxidizing. Platinum was resistant to oxidation but prohibitively expensive for mass-produced appliances. Wires would burn out, sag, or break after only limited use. A durable, affordable material was needed that could withstand getting red hot repeatedly without failing. This was the core material science challenge that needed solving for electric heating appliances, including the toaster, to become practical. A quirky tidbit about these early heating experiments involves some of the less successful or stranger designs. Before the standard heating element wires became common, some inventors experimented with using carbon rods or other resistive materials in unusual configurations, sometimes leading to inefficient devices that produced more light or sparks than useful heat for cooking. Imagine trying to cook on something that looked like a small cage of glowing charcoal sticks connected to a wire. There's joke number one. Yes, it gets hot, and occasionally makes exciting zapping noises, just like cooking should be. Early in the age of electrification, roughly spanning the late 19th and early 20th centuries, inventors across various countries actively experimented with converting electrical energy into heat for numerous domestic cooking applications, including rudimentary electric stoves, hot plates, kettles, coffee makers, and various designs specifically intended for heating or toasting food. This is our mainstream historical fact, covering the breadth of early efforts. The potential was clear, clean, convenient heat on demand. But the reality of these earliest experimental devices could be frustrating. They might be slow to heat up, inefficient in their energy use, and prone to breaking down. They were novelties, hinting at a future convenience but not yet reliable everyday tools. Historians debate which specific type of domestic electric heating appliance, beyond basic lighting itself, was truly the earliest to reach a level of practical application and initial commercial availability in the late 19th or very early 20th century. While electric irons and kettles saw early development, was there a clear pioneer among cooking devices like hot plates or early toasters? Or did they all emerge roughly simultaneously as inventors tackled the same fundamental challenges of using electric heat? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to pinpoint the very first steps in electric cooking appliances. This period of experimentation was essential. It showed the promise of electric heat in the kitchen and highlighted the technical hurdles that needed to be overcome. Inventors were sparking ideas, laying the groundwork for a future filled with electric convenience. Joke number two. You look at a diagram of an early electric stove concept. So, just put glowing wires under everything. Seems simple enough. What could possibly go wrong? The next step was finding the key material that would make these heating elements durable and reliable, a breakthrough that would be particularly important for the development of the electric toaster. Joke number 3. You imagine an inventor trying different wires. Platinum too expensive, iron it rusted. Is there any wire that just gets hot and stays that way? Inventors were sparking ideas, dreaming of electric heat in the kitchen, creating early versions of hot plates, kettles, and toasting devices. But they kept running into a fundamental problem, a persistent technical and material science challenge finding the right wire for the heating element. As we know, electric current flowing through a resistive wire generates heat. That's the basic principle. But for heating appliances, that wire needs to get hot, often glowing red hot repeatedly, over many uses without failing. Early experiments used materials like iron, which was cheap, but it oxidized, rusted, and degraded rapidly when heated in air, causing the wires to become brittle and break. Platinum was resistant to oxidation and could handle high temperatures, but it was prohibitively expensive for mass production, suitable only for laboratory experiments or perhaps incredibly luxurious. One-off devices. Wires made of carbon were experimented with, but they could be fragile and also tended to oxidize or burn away in air. Inventors needed a material that had the right balance, high enough electrical resistance to generate significant heat, excellent resistance to oxidation and corrosion even at high temperatures, and the ability to withstand repeated heating and cooling cycles without deforming, sagging, or breaking. And ideally, it needed to be relatively affordable to manufacture into wires and sell in consumer appliances. Finding this magic wire was the critical enabling step for making practical, long-lasting electric heating appliances a reality. This challenge was finally met in the early 20th century with the invention of specific metal alloys, particularly nichrome. Developed by Albert Marsh around 1905-1906, nichrome is primarily an alloy of nickel and chromium, often with some iron content. Marsh patented several variations of nickel-chromium alloys specifically for use as electrical heating elements. Nichrome possessed the ideal combination of properties. Its composition gave it high electrical resistance, meaning it generated significant heat when current flowed through it. Crucially, the chromium in the alloy forms a tough, self-healing oxide layer on the surface when heated, protecting the underlying nickel and chromium from further oxidation, even at red-hot temperatures. This made nichrome incredibly durable and resistant to failure under repeated heating cycles in air. It could get hot, stay hot, cool down, and do it all again and again without rapidly degrading. And while nickel and chromium weren't as cheap as iron, they were far more affordable than platinum, making them viable for manufacturing consumer goods. This invention of durable nickel-chromium alloys like nichrome was a critical technological breakthrough. It provided inventors and manufacturers with a reliable, long-lasting material for creating the heating elements that were the heart of electric heating appliances. From hot plates and irons to, yes, electric toasters. The widespread use of nichrome or similar alloys made these devices practical and durable enough to enter ordinary homes. The invention of durable metal alloys resistant to high-temperature oxidation, most notably nichrome, a nickel-chromium alloy patented in the early 20th century, was a critical technological breakthrough that provided a reliable, long-lasting material for electric heating elements, making practical domestic appliances like toasters and irons possible for mass production. This is our mainstream historical fact, pinpointing the material revolution. When you see the heating elements in an old or even a modern toaster glowing red, you are seeing nichrome or a similar alloy at work, silently converting electricity into radiant heat. Sensory details the visual of a wire heating up from dull gray to a steady, warm red glow. The feeling of the radiant heat emanating outwards from the glowing element. A quirky tidbit about the material search involves some of the other alloys or materials that were tested and found wanting before nichrome became standard. Inventors experimented with various combinations of metals, some of which worked briefly but quickly failed, perhaps sparking or crumbling after only a few uses. There are anecdotes of early experimental heating elements that would glow brightly but then sag dramatically or even melt into strange shapes, providing fleeting heat but no lasting function. Imagine the frustration of an inventor whose heating element literally melts before their eyes. There's joke number one. Eureka, I've found it. The perfect heating wire. Oh, wait, it's gone. And possibly took the wall socket with it. Historians debate the relative contributions of various inventors and research efforts to the development and widespread adoption of durable nickel-chromium heating elements for electric appliances. While Albert Marsh holds key patents for early nichrome alloys specifically for heating applications, were there parallel developments in other companies or countries that also played a significant role in establishing the standard for heating elements? Who should truly get the most credit for making the hot wire practical for everyday appliances? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, delving into the specifics of the invention's history. The development of nichrome solved the core technical problem that had limited early electric heating experiments. It provided the essential component, a reliable, durable heating element, that would allow appliances like the electric toaster to move beyond experimental prototypes and become practical consumer products. Joke number two, you picture an inventor finally holding a piece of nichrome wire. Tears in their eyes. It doesn't melt, it just gets hot. It was a quiet but profound invention, hidden inside appliances, but fundamentally enabling a new era of domestic convenience. Joke number three, you imagine a piece of nichrome wire thinking to itself, my destiny to make breakfast slightly easier for millions. And glow a lot. The material challenge was solved. Nichrome provided the durable wire needed to generate reliable heat repeatedly without breaking down or oxidizing. With this key piece of the puzzle finally in place, inventors could move from simply experimenting with resistive heating elements to designing the first practical electric appliances that used them. And among the first domestic heating tasks to find a successful form was the humble act of making toast. With nichrome or similar nickel-chromium alloys available, engineers could create heating elements that were long-lasting enough to be viable in consumer products. The first patents and designs for commercially successful electric toasters began to emerge in the early years of the 20th century. While earlier attempts might have existed, these were the designs that started to gain traction and actually make it into homes. The very first commercially successful electric toaster designs were notably simple, especially compared to the pop-up wonders we use today. They are often referred to as open-rack toasters or cage toasters. The basic idea was straightforward mount the durable nichrome heating element, S, vertically or horizontally on a frame, and provide a way to hold a slice of bread near them so the radiant heat could toast it. Imagine the design a base, often made of metal like nickel-plated steel or polished steel, with ceramic insulators attached. Mounted on these ceramic insulators were the nichrome wires, often coiled or strung back and forth to create a heating surface. These wires were usually exposed, or perhaps protected by a minimal metal guard. Around this heating element, a simple frame was built. This frame had slots or hinged wire sides designed to hold one or two slices of bread upright. Positioned a short distance from the glowing wires, sensory details the visual of bare or lightly guarded wires mounted on white or gray ceramic. The feel of smooth, polished metal. The distinct, slightly metallic smell when first heating up, or dust burning off. Using one of these early toasters was a manual process. There were no timers, no springs, no automatic shutoff. You would connect the toaster to the electrical supply, often screwing a plug into a light socket, as wall outlets weren't yet standard everywhere. The nichrome wires would begin to heat up, slowly at first, then progressing to a dull red glow, and eventually a brighter, cherry red heat. You would insert a slice of bread into the slot or cage, positioned next to the glowing element. And then, you literally stood there, observing the bread as it began to change color. When one side was toasted to your satisfaction, you had to manually intervene. You would open the hinged side if it had one, or carefully reach in with a fork, being mindful of the glowing wires to flip the slice around so the other side was facing the element. Then you'd watch again until the second side was done. The whole process required your constant attention. Joke number one. Ah, the convenience of electric toasting just requires you to stand there, stare intently at bread, and manually flip it over glowing hot wires. So much easier. The materials used in construction reflected the technology available and the need for durability and heat resistance. The metal body needed to withstand the heat radiating from the elements. Ceramic was essential for insulating the hot nichrome wires from the metal frame and the electrical connections. The nichrome wire itself was the heart of the device. The electrical connection would be a simple cord ending and a plug designed to screw into a light socket or, less commonly initially, fit into an early wall outlet. One of the earliest and most iconic commercially successful electric toasters was the General Electric D12 model, introduced around 1909. It featured an open rack design with a vertical heating element and hinged wire sides that folded down, allowing you to place bread on them and then fold them up to position the bread next to the element. You had to flip the bread manually by lowering the side, turning the bread, and raising it again. This simple exposed design was characteristic of the first wave of electric toasters. Our quirky tidbit. The GED12 was nicknamed the toaster that can't forget because it didn't automatically shut off, requiring the user to actively remember to stop the toasting process to avoid burnt toast. A direct result of its manual nature, the novelty of these appliances was significant. Here was a device that could make toast on your countertop using the clean, modern power of electricity without needing a hot stove or an open fire. It was a tangible demonstration of the potential of domestic electricity to simplify everyday tasks. Following the invention of durable heating element materials like nichrome, the first commercially successful electric toasters emerged in the United States and other electrified nations in the early years of the 20th century. Featuring simple open rack or cage designs that required manual operation and explicit intervention, like flipping the bread to achieve toasting. This is our mainstream historical fact, covering the characteristics of the first generation of these devices. Historians debate the specific inventor or company that should be credited with inventing the very first commercially successful electric toaster design that gained significant traction. While Frank Shaler of GE is often cited for his 1909 patent and the D12 model's success, were there other inventors or companies producing similar practical designs around the same time in the US or elsewhere? Contributing to the rapid development of this new appliance category. This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to pinpoint the exact genesis of the commercial electric toaster. These early toasters, while primitive by today's standards, were revolutionary steps away from manual methods. They brought electric heat directly to the task of toasting, offering a glimpse into a future of automated kitchen convenience, even if that convenience still required you to do the flipping. Joke number 2, you show off your new electric toaster. Behold, fireless toast just requires diligent supervision and the hand-eye coordination of a seasoned chef. They were the direct ancestors of every toaster that has sat on a kitchen counter since. Simple machines with a glowing heart of nichrome. Joke number 3. You watch the wire glow. Get hot, magic wire, get hot. My breakfast depends on your stable elemental composition. The material challenge was solved, nichrome providing the durable wires needed. The first designs for electric toasters, simple open rack or cage models, began to appear in kitchens, promising a new era of convenient toast. But what was it actually like to use one of these early electric toasters? It was a significantly different experience from dropping 2 slices into slots and pressing a lever, involving more attention, patience, and manual dexterity. You would take your electric toaster, perhaps a GED12 or a similar model from another manufacturer, and place it on a heat-resistant surface on your kitchen counter. You'd plug it into the electrical outlet, or more commonly initially, screw the plug into a light socket adapter. The moment the connection was made, the process began. Electricity flowed into the nichrome heating elements, and they would start to warm up. It wasn't instant. The wires took a little time to reach their toasting temperature, slowly changing color from dull gray to a faint red. then a brighter, glowing red as they heated up. While the elements heated, you'd prepare your bread. These early toasters typically accommodated one or two slices at a time. You would open the hinged side if your model had them, or simply place the slice of bread into the slot next to the vertical element. And then, the central action of using an early electric toaster you watched. There was no timer, no browning control dial to select a level of doneness, and definitely no pop-up mechanism. Your eyes were the timer, your judgment, the browning control. You had to stand there and monitor the bread as the radiant heat from the glowing nichrome elements began to toast it. You watched as the surface slowly changed color, from pale bread to golden to brown. Sensory details the visual of the nichrome wires glowing steadily red, the sight of the bread surface gradually changing color, the feeling of the radiant heat on your hands if you got too close, the developing aroma of toasting bread. The toasting process took several minutes per side. These early elements weren't as powerful or as efficient as modern ones, and the open design meant some heat was lost to the surrounding air. Patience was required. You couldn't just walk away and come back later. You risked ending up with carbonized bread. When the first side of the bread was toasted to your liking, perhaps a light golden brown, or maybe darker if you preferred it that way, it was time for the manual intervention. You had to somehow flip the bread over to toast the other side. On models with hinged sides, you would carefully lower the side, turn the slice of bread around, and raise the side again to position the untoasted side towards the element. On simpler open rack designs, you might need to use a fork again, carefully, to maneuver the bread. Sensory details, the slight warmth radiating from the metal frame or hinged side, the feeling of carefully manipulating the bread near the heat, the sound of the hinged side mechanism clicking. This manual flipping step was central to the experience. It required you to be actively involved in the toasting process from start to finish. You were the automation, the timer, the flipper, and the final judge of doneness. Early 20th century electric toasters, particularly the common open rack and cage designs, fundamentally required users to manually place the bread near the heating elements, constantly monitor the toasting progress, and physically flip the bread slices halfway through the process, lacking any automatic timing or ejection features. This is our mainstream historical fact, highlighting the manual nature of these devices. Getting both sides evenly toasted required skill and attention gained through practice. You learned how long one side usually took, how close to hold the bread if your model allowed adjustment, and how quickly to flip. Sometimes, despite your best efforts, one side might still end up darker than the other, or the edges might toast faster than the center. It was an improvement over trying to balance bread over an open fire. Certainly cleaner and arguably more consistent, but it was far from the push-button ease of today. A quirky tidbit about using these early toasters involves user advice. Early instruction manuals or articles about using electric appliances often included explicit instructions on the art of flipping toast manually, sometimes suggesting specific techniques to avoid burning your fingers or damaging the heating element. Some resourceful users might even devise their own simple tools or methods for flipping. Beyond the provided hinge sides or a basic fork, adding a layer of personal innovation to the toasting process. Imagine a grandmother passing down her secret technique for the perfect electric toast flip. There's joke number 1, Master the Flip, a guide to early electric toasting success. Chapter 1, Introduction to Not Burning Your Fingers. Despite the manual effort involved, these toasters were seen as a step forward. They were cleaner than fire or gas, produced less ambient heat than a stovetop rack, and offered a novel way to use the exciting new power of electricity for a simple, everyday task. Historians debate the level of user satisfaction and market penetration of these early manual flip electric toasters before the advent of more automated designs. Were they seen as a significant, worthwhile improvement over older methods despite the manual work, eagerly adopted by those with electricity, or were they viewed as somewhat inconvenient novelties? Only gaining widespread appeal once more automated versions appeared, This is our open scholarly debate phrase, understanding how well these first electric toasters were received by the public. The experience of using an early electric toaster was one of active engagement. It wasn't a background task. It demanded your presence, and you stood there, watching the slow transformation of bread into toast, responsible for every step of the process. Joke number 2, you proudly present your toast. Behold, perfectly toasted mostly. This corner is just rustic. It was the birth of electric toast, a simple act transformed by a new technology, even if it still required a human touch. Joke number 3, you imagine explaining it to someone from the future. So you just put bread in and walk away. What about the joy of the manual flip? You're missing out. You've experienced the manual process of toasting with an early electric toaster, the watching, the waiting, the crucial manual flip. You've seen the nichrome wires glow red, felt the radiant heat. Now, let's step back from the user experience and look at the physical object itself. The components that were put together to create these pioneering appliances, their materials and construction. Early electric toasters, like the open rack and cage designs from the first decade or two of the 20th century, were relatively simple devices in terms of their components and how they were assembled. They were built primarily from materials that could withstand heat and safely conduct or insulate electricity. Reflecting the manufacturing capabilities and material science of the era, the main body or frame of the toaster was typically made of metal. Steel was common, often finished with nickel plating. Nickel plating gave the toaster a bright, shiny, attractive surface that was also somewhat resistant to rust and corrosion, making the appliance look clean and modern in the kitchen. You would feel the cool, smooth surface of the polished metal when the toaster was off, and the radiating heat when it was on. Other metals might be used, but nickel-plated steel was a popular choice for its balance of appearance, durability, and cost. Sensory details the feel of cool, smooth metal, the bright visual reflection from a polished nickel surface. Mounted within this metal frame were the crucial heating elements, the nichrome wires we discussed. But these wires couldn't touch the metal body of the toaster, as that would cause a short circuit, posing a shock hazard and potentially damaging the appliance or the electrical system. This is where ceramic insulators came in. Pieces of ceramic, often white or off-white porcelain or steatite, were used to create a non-conductive base or frame onto which the nichrome wires were strung or coiled. The nichrome wires were threaded through holes or held in grooves in the ceramic pieces, keeping them rigidly in place and safely separated from the metal body. Ceramic was ideal because it is an excellent electrical insulator and can withstand very high temperatures without melting or degrading. You'd see these brittle, hard white or gray ceramic pieces forming the backbone of the heating element assembly. Sensory details the feel of hard, smooth, or slightly rough ceramic. The visual contrast of the white-gray ceramic against the metal and the glowing wires. The nichrome wire itself was the heart. As we've covered, converting the electricity to heat, it was relatively thin but tough, strung back and forth across the ceramic insulators to create a large surface area for heat radiation. Other materials were used for smaller parts. Handles, if present on the sides for carrying or flipping, might be made of wood or an early heat-resistant plastic like bakelite, which became more common later. But some early forms existed. These materials provided a surface you could touch without getting burned. The electrical cord connecting the toaster to the power source was typically a fabric-covered wire, ending in a basic plug designed for the electrical systems of the time, often a screw-in plug for light sockets initially. The construction was generally straightforward and robust. These toasters didn't have complex internal mechanisms like later pop-up models. They were essentially a metal frame holding a heated element, with a way to position bread nearby, screws, nuts, and bolts held the metal and ceramic pieces together. The exposed nature of the elements and the simple mechanical parts reflected the pioneering stage of domestic electric appliance manufacturing. Early electric toasters commercially available in the early 20th century were primarily constructed from key materials, including metal, often steel with nickel plating for the structural body. ceramic insulators like porcelain or steatite to safely mount the durable nichrome heating elements, and basic electrical wiring and connectors, reflecting the materials, science, and manufacturing capabilities of the era. This is our mainstream historical fact, outlining the fundamental components. A quirky tidbit about materials involves the visual design flair attempted on these early, simple appliances. While functionality was key, manufacturers often tried to make them appealing. Some models featured decorative patterns stamped into the metalwork or unusually shaped ceramic insulators. Others might have feet made of a distinctive material like bakelite, even in its early forms, or unusually shaped wooden handles. Imagine a toaster with decorative ceramic pieces shaped like leaves or flowers. There's joke number one. Yes, it makes toast. But look at those elegant scrolled metal feet. It's practically furniture. Historians debate the consistency of manufacturing quality and material composition in early electric toasters across different companies and price points. Given the rapid development and multiple manufacturers entering the market, did variations in the quality of the nickel plating, the purity of the ceramic insulators, or the precise composition of the heating element wire significantly affect the durability, safety, and toasting performance of different models? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, questioning how much product reliability varied depending on who made the toaster and how much it cost. Examining the materials and construction reveals the simplicity and ingenuity of these early appliances. They were built to convert electricity to heat using the best available materials, safely insulating the hot parts from the exterior. Joke number two. You tap the ceramic insulator. This little piece of baked clay is basically what stands between you and a shocking breakfast. They were robust, but lacked the refined finishes and integrated safety features of modern appliances. Joke number three. You look at the cord, just attach this to a light socket. What could go wrong? Besides, fire or electrocution. Minor details. These combinations of metal, ceramic, and nichrome were the physical embodiment of the first electric toasters, built for manual operation but ready to deliver clean, fireless heat. You've seen the first designs, the open racks, the exposed nichrome wires, the simple metal and ceramic construction. You've experienced the manual process of using one, watching the bread, flipping it yourself. These were the first electric toasters, products of a new material and a new power source. But simply inventing something isn't enough. To bring about a gentle revolution, manufacturers had to convince people they actually needed this new device. This required marketing and advertising, introducing a new way to make toast to a public accustomed to fire and stove methods. In the early 20th century, the concept of a dedicated electric appliance for making toast was entirely new. People weren't sitting around saying, "If only I had a machine that could toast bread using electricity instead of my stovetop rack." Manufacturers had to create the demand, educate the public about what this new gadget did, and explain why it was a worthwhile purchase, especially given that electricity was still a relatively new and costly utility for many. Early advertising for electric toasters focused on key selling points designed to appeal to the modernizing household. Convenience was a major theme. Advertisements would often contrast the fiddly, time-consuming process of making toast over a fire or on a stove with the simple act of placing bread in the electric toaster. While these early models still required manual flipping, they eliminated the need to tend a separate fire or ensure the main stove was hot enough just for toast. They offered heat on demand, focused specifically on the task at hand. Modern aside, imagine advertising a manual coffee grinder today by highlighting how it's so much faster than pounding beans with a rock. It's all relative. Cleanliness was another significant advantage promoted heavily. Electric toasters produced no smoke unlike fire and no gas fumes unlike gas stoves. There was no soot to worry about. They were presented as a clean, modern way to cook, fitting into the ideal of a hygienic, efficient home. The bright, often nickel-plated surfaces of the toasters themselves reinforce this image of cleanliness and modernity. Sensory details the visual of clean, shiny metal in advertisements, the implied lack of smoky smells compared to older methods. Modernity and novelty were also key selling points. Owning an electric toaster was a tangible sign that your home was connected to the exciting new world of electricity. It positioned you as forward-thinking and up-to-date. Advertisements often featured sleek, for the time illustrations of the toaster, highlighting its electric nature as a desirable feature in itself. It was a gadget, a piece of new technology for the kitchen. Early advertising visuals often depicted clean, bright kitchens reflecting the ideal of the electrified home, sometimes showing a neat family enjoying perfect-looking electric toast. The language was aspirational, linking the toaster to a modern, easier way of life. These ads appeared in popular magazines, newspapers, and promotional brochures distributed by electrical companies and appliance manufacturers. The target audience initially was clearly those households that had already gone through the expense and process of getting wired for electricity. These were typically more affluent, urban families. Advertising was aimed at showing them the next step in leveraging their new electrical connection, using it for kitchen tasks beyond just lighting. Early 20th century electric toasters were actively marketed by manufacturers using advertisements that heavily emphasized their convenience, cleanliness, and modernity. They were positioned as desirable, cutting-edge electric appliances essential for the modern home, primarily targeting the growing number of households with access to electricity. This is our mainstream historical fact, detailing the initial marketing strategy. A quirky tidbit about early toaster advertising involves some of the more unusual or exaggerated claims or imagery used to grab attention. Beyond touting convenience, some ads might feature bizarre illustrations of people looking overly ecstatic about their toast, or make strange comparisons to highlight the toaster's benefits. Imagine an ad with a slogan like, "Say goodbye to toasting tears," accompanied by an image of someone dramatically crying over a burnt piece of toast made on a stove. There's joke number 1. Warning may cause excessive breakfast happiness. Side effects include smug satisfaction with your perfectly browned bread. Historians debate the effectiveness of this early 20th century advertising in specifically driving the adoption of electric toasters, compared to other early electric appliances like irons or kettles. How much did these marketing campaigns truly create the demand for an electric toaster, convincing people to buy something they didn't previously exist? Or did the demand build more organically over time as electricity became cheaper and more common, with advertising merely helping people choose which brand to buy once they were already in the market for electric appliances? This is our open, scholarly debate phrase, questioning how much marketing shaped consumer desire for this new gadget. Seeing these old advertisements today, with their earnest illustrations and enthusiastic copy, gives you a sense of the era's excitement about new technology and the ways manufacturers tried to integrate appliances into the vision of a modern, efficient home. Joke number 2. You look at an old ad featuring a perfectly coiffed woman beaming at a slice of toast. Clearly, electric toast was the secret to eternal happiness and flawless hair. They were selling not just a toaster, but a lifestyle, a step into the future enabled by electricity. Joke number 3. You imagine an old-timey salesman pitching the toaster. Forget manual labor, embrace the glow of progress and get perfectly toasted bread, provided you flip it at the right time. Advertising played a crucial role in introducing the public to the idea that making toast could be part of the coming electric age. You've seen how early electric toasters were designed. The simple open rack, the exposed nichrome wires, the metal and ceramic construction. You've learned about the manual process of using them and how manufacturers tried to market them as modern conveniences. But the electric toaster didn't appear in isolation in the home. It was part of a broader trend, joining a growing suite of other new electric appliances that were gradually transforming the kitchen and changing the nature of domestic work. In the early decades of the 20th century, the kitchen was changing. For generations, it had been dominated by the large, ever-present stove or hearth, the single source of heat for most cooking tasks. Preparing a meal often involved managing fire, coal, or gas, and many tasks required the direct heat of the stovetop or oven. But with electricity arriving in homes, the possibility of having dedicated, smaller appliances for specific jobs emerged. The electric toaster was one such appliance, finding its place alongside others that aimed to bring convenience and efficiency to the kitchen and elsewhere in the home. You saw the rise of the electric iron, replacing the heavy stove-heated irons that were a staple of laundry day. Electric kettles became increasingly popular for boiling water quickly without needing to fire up the stove. Early electric hot plates offered a portable, single cooking surface. There were electric coffee percolators, waffle irons, and even early mixers appearing in some kitchens. Early electric toasters were part of a broader wave of new electric household appliances emerging in the early 20th century, including electric irons, kettles, hot plates, fans, and early cooking gadgets, all contributing to a gradual but significant transformation of the kitchen into a more appliance-driven and convenient workspace. Initially in electrified urban homes, this is our mainstream historical fact. Placing the toaster within this technological shift, the toaster fit neatly into this trend of single-purpose electric gadgets. Just as an electric kettle did one thing heated water, and an electric iron did one thing heated for pressing clothes, the electric toaster did one thing made toast. It took a specific manual task that previously required interaction with the main heat source and gave it its own dedicated electric appliance. This shift meant that some kitchen work became less physically demanding. You no longer needed to tend a fire specifically to make toast, or wait for the main stove to reach temperature. You had heat on demand for that one task. It was cleaner, faster compared to some older methods, and offered a level of convenience that simply hadn't existed before for something as simple as toasting bread. The visual of the early electrified kitchen began to change. Alongside the familiar stove and sink, new metal appliances with wires trailing from them started appearing on countertops and tables. They were often made of shiny, nickel-plated metal, looking futuristic and clean compared to the cast iron of the stove or the copper of older kettles. The presence of these electric gadgets signaled a modern home, equipped with the latest technology to ease domestic labor. Initially, as we've mentioned, this suite of electric appliances was primarily found in wealthier households that could afford both the cost of wiring their homes and the price of the early appliances. Owning an electric toaster, or an electric kettle, or an electric iron was a status symbol, showcasing your connection to the electric age and your ability to afford its conveniences. These early appliances were the vanguards of the modern kitchen. A quirky tidbit about these early electrified kitchens involves some of the less common, or perhaps short-lived gadgets that also appeared during this experimental phase. Inventors were trying to electrify all sorts of tasks. You might encounter early electric egg beaters cumbersome, electric knife sharpeners, heated shaving mugs, or even early attempts at electrically heated serving dishes. Imagine a kitchen countertop cluttered with a half-dozen different single-purpose electric gadgets, all plugged into adapters screwed into light sockets. There's joke number one. Yes, we're fully electric. We have an electric toaster, an electric kettle, and this electric thingy. I think it sharpens spoons. Historians debate which specific early electric household appliance had the most significant immediate impact on transforming daily kitchen routines and domestic labor in the early 20th century. Was it the electric iron, saving significant time and effort in laundry? Was it the electric kettle, making hot drinks much faster? Or were small cooking gadgets like the hot plate or the manual electric toaster more immediately transformative in changing how specific food tasks were done? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to determine which of these early gadgets had the biggest initial ripple effect on everyday life. The arrival of electric toasters and other appliances marked a step towards the kitchen as a more convenient, task-specific workspace. It was the beginning of the shift from reliance on a central heat source to having a tool designed specifically for each job, powered by electricity. Joke number two, you look at your new electric toaster next to your old stovetop rack. Sorry, us old friend. Your fire-based days are over. It's all about the glow now. These early appliances, including the simple manual toaster, were symbols of a gentle revolution taking place in the home. gradually changing how people approach daily tasks and laying the groundwork for the appliance-filled kitchens of the future. Joke number 3. You imagine explaining your electric toaster to someone from a century earlier. It makes toast without fire, and it only costs, well, quite a lot. But look, it's shiny. Okay? They represented the promise of electricity to simplify life. One task, one appliance at a time. You've seen how early electric toasters found their place in the kitchen, joining other new electric gadgets like irons and kettles, signaling a move towards convenience and modernity. You've experienced the basic design, the exposed glowing wires, the manual process of watching and flipping bread. But inventors didn't stop with those initial simple open racks. The design of electric toasters continued to evolve relatively quickly in the early years, aiming to make that manual flipping process a little bit easier and safer. The first open rack designs often required you to use a fork to maneuver the bread, or had very basic hinge sides that weren't always the most convenient. Manufacturers began to refine these designs, adding simple mechanical features aimed at improving the toasting experience, specifically by making the flipping step more integrated into the appliance itself. The key innovation in this phase was the development of hinge sides or internal wire cages that held the bread more securely and allowed you to flip it without directly touching the bread or reaching near the hot elements with a separate tool. You'd see designs where the wire side panels were connected with hinges, so you could lower them flat to place the bread, then raise them back up to position the bread vertically next to the elements. To flip, you'd lower the side again, manually turn the bread, and raise the side back up. This was still manual, but it reduced the risk of dropping the bread or burning your fingers on the hot wires. Sensory details the sound of metal hinges moving, the feel of the wire cage or hinged side as you manipulate it, the visual of the bread being held securely by the wires. Another popular design involved a central heating element with hinged wire cages on either side. You would place a slice of bread in each cage, then fold the cages inward so the bread was positioned next to the glowing central element. To flip, you would simply fold the cages outwards, manually turn the bread in the cage, and fold the cage back inwards. This allowed you to toast 2 slices at once, one on each side of the central heating element, and made flipping slightly quicker and less awkward. These designs represented an important step in the evolution of the toaster. They showed inventors were thinking about the user experience and trying to streamline the process. The goal was to make toasting cleaner and safer than traditional methods, and now slightly more convenient and less prone to human error like dropping the bread than the very first electric versions. They were adding simple mechanical ingenuity to the electrical heating technology. You'd see different variations from different manufacturers, different ways the sides hinged, different designs for the wire cages, different mechanisms for holding the bread in place. Some were more robust than others, some were easier to flip. They all shared the core concept of using nichrome elements to generate heat, but differed in the mechanical means provided for handling the bread during toasting. Early electric toaster designs rapidly evolved in the first decades of the 20th century, moving beyond the simplest open rack concepts to widely incorporate mechanical features such as hinged wire sides or internal cages specifically designed to hold the bread slices securely and facilitate the manual flipping required to toast both sides. This is our mainstream historical fact, detailing this key phase of design development. A quirky tidbit about these designs involves some of the more elaborate or finicky flipping mechanisms attempted before standards emerged. Some inventors patented designs that involved complex levers, rotating racks, or even mechanisms that would partially slide or tilt the bread, all in an effort to simplify the manual flip. Some of these were overly complicated and prone to breaking, but they show the intense focus on solving this particular user problem. Imagine a toaster with half a dozen levers you had to pull in sequence just to turn your toast. There's joke number 1. Ah, yes, the engineer's nightmare model. Toasting is now a thrilling puzzle involving multiple moving parts. Or you might hear anecdotes about a particular model whose hinge sides were prone to sticking, requiring a forceful jiggle that sometimes sent the bread flying. These improved designs made manual electric toasting more practical for everyday use. They were still manual. You still had to watch, decide when to flip, and physically manipulate the bread. But the process was smoother and less likely to result in frustration or dropped toast. Modern aside, it's like comparing a very early car with a hand crank starter and a complex gear shift to a slightly later model with an electric starter and a more intuitive transmission. Still requires effort, but it's getting easier. Historians debate the relative significance of specific early mechanical design innovations in manual electric toasters. Which particular features, like the hinged side concept versus the internal rotating cage, had the biggest impact on improving user convenience and arguably influenced the design of later models the most? Did different design philosophies emerge in different companies, emphasizing different aspects of the user experience? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, dissecting the impact of these specific mechanical improvements. These evolving designs, with their clever hinges and cages, represented a step closer to the automation that would eventually revolutionize toasting. They showed a focus on making the new electric technology user-friendly, building on the initial breakthrough of the heating element. Joke number 2, you show off the hinged side. See much better than a fork progress. They were still manual, still required your attention, but they made the act of making toast by electricity a more refined process. Joke number 3, you flip the bread in the cage. Almost automatic, just needs my hand. The stage was being set for the next big leap. You've seen how early electric toasters evolved in design, moving from the simplest open racks to models with hinged sides and wire cages that made manual flipping a bit easier. You've also seen how they took their place among other new electric appliances in the kitchen. But beyond the design and the gadgetry, how did having one of these early electric toasters actually impact daily life in the home? For many electrified households, it gently started to change breakfast habits. Before electric toasters, making toast was a process that required active engagement with the primary heat source, standing by the fire or stove, holding bread on a fork, or using a stovetop rack, constantly watching and flipping. This made fresh toast somewhat inconvenient for a quick, regular breakfast, especially on busy mornings. It might have been a task for a dedicated cook or a chore that added time to the morning routine. The electric toaster, even in its early manual flip form, changed that. For households with electricity, it provided a dedicated, relatively fast compared to some older methods, and a cleaner way to make toast right on the counter. You could plug it in, put the bread in, and while you still had to watch and flip, you didn't need to tend a fire or use up valuable space on the main stove just for toast. This increased accessibility and convenience meant that fresh toast could become a more regular feature of the morning meal for families in electrified homes. It was no longer just a way to use up stale bread or an occasional weekend treat involving more effort. It became a readily available staple, a simple carb that could be toasted quickly while eggs were frying, coffee was brewing, or other breakfast items were prepared. Imagine a kitchen scene in the 1910s or 1920s, the gentle hum of an early electric appliance or two, the smell of coffee, and now the distinct aroma of bread toasting steadily from the electric toaster on the counter. Someone, perhaps a housewife, manages the process, placing the bread, keeping an eye on it, flipping it at the right moment, and delivering warm, golden brown slices to the breakfast table. It was a small task made significantly easier and quicker than ever before. Sensory details the consistent smell of toasting bread from the electric element. Different from smoky fire toast, the visual of the bread browning evenly on one side, the warmth radiating from the toaster on the counter. This seemingly small change in how toast was made contributed to a broader shift in breakfast habits towards more easily prepared, convenient foods. As more electric appliances became available, electric griddles for pancakes, electric waffle irons, percolators for coffee, the morning meal, especially in urban middle-class homes, could become less reliant on complex stovetop cooking and more about quickly prepared items enabled by these new gadgets. Toast fit perfectly into this new landscape of electric breakfast convenience. It became a standard accompaniment to eggs and bacon, a base for butter and jam, a simple, comforting start to the day. The introduction and increasing availability of early electric toasters in the first decades of the 20th century contributed to a gradual shift in breakfast habits in electrified homes, making fresh toast a more convenient, readily consumed, and regularly featured food item as part of the morning meal. This is our mainstream historical fact, highlighting the toaster's impact on daily routines. A quirky tidbit about toast habits involves specific toppings or ways of serving toast that might have been particularly popular then, or the novelty associated with serving electric toast. Perhaps serving soldiers strips of toast for dipping in soft-boiled eggs became easier and more common. Or maybe people experimented with new toppings now that toast was a more frequent occurrence. Imagine a discussion about whether electric toast tastes better than fire toast. There's joke number one. Mother, this toast is uniformly brown. The future has arrived. Past the gentleman's relish. Historians debate the speed and extent to which electric toasters specifically altered morning breakfast routines across different types of households once adopted. Was the impact immediate and significant in changing what families ate and how they prepared it? Or was it a more gradual shift that occurred alongside other changes in food production? Appliance technology and social habits throughout the first half of the 20th century. This is our open, scholarly debate phrase, assessing just how revolutionary this simple toaster was for the morning table. Having an electric toaster meant that the decision to have toast for breakfast required less planning and effort. It moved from being a bit of a production to being a quick, easy option. Joke number two. You flip the toast in the cage. 2 minutes per side. That's practically instant gratification. It was a small convenience, but one that touched a daily routine, making the start of the day slightly smoother for those who had access to this new technology. Joke number three. You present a stack of fresh toast. Breakfast is served, brought to you by the miracle of glowing wire. The electric toaster, in its unassuming way, played a role in the gentle revolution of the kitchen, helping to change not just how food was prepared, but what food became a regular part of the daily diet, all starting with that morning slice of toast. You've seen how electric toasters evolved in their mechanical design, adding hinged sides and cages to simplify the manual flip. You've explored how they fit into the changing landscape of the early electrified kitchen and how their convenience began to alter breakfast habits. But while these early appliances brought modernity and ease, they also came with a less glamorous side, the risk involved with harnessing this new power source, particularly safety concerns like fire and electric shock. While electricity offered a cleaner way to generate heat than fire or gas, no smoke, no open flame for the heat source itself, the early appliances that used it were not built with the extensive safety features we take for granted today. The design and the materials, while revolutionary, also presented potential hazards. The primary risk was fire. These toasters operated by heating nichrome wires to a red-hot glow. The metal bodies surrounding these elements also became very hot through radiant heat and conduction. If the toaster was placed too close to flammable materials on the countertop, a dish towel, curtains, paper, it could easily start a fire. Furthermore, the manual nature of the toasting process meant that the heating element stayed on as long as it was plugged in and switched on if it had a switch. There was no automatic timer or shutoff. If you got distracted and forgot about the bread you were toasting, it could easily catch fire right there in the toaster. Crumbs accumulating in the bottom of the toaster could also ignite from the heat. Sensory details, the acrid smell of burning dust or crumbs, the sharper, more alarming smell of singed fabric or paper, the visual of smoke or flame starting, the intense heat radiating from the appliance. Another significant risk was electric shock. Early home wiring systems were often rudimentary by modern standards. Appliance cords were typically covered in fabric, which could fray or be damaged by the heat of the toaster body. Exposing the wires, plugs and connectors were simpler, sometimes with exposed metal terminals. The metal body of the toaster itself could potentially become live if the ceramic insulators supporting the heating element failed, or if wiring came loose and touched the metal frame. There was less widespread safety regulation and standardization in manufacturing compared to today, meaning the quality of insulation and wiring could vary. Touching a live metal toaster body while also touching something grounded like a metal sink or pipe could result in a nasty, potentially dangerous electric shock. Sensory details the smell of overheating insulation, the visual of a spark, the jarring, unpleasant sensation of an electric shock. Users of these early electric heating appliances had to exercise significant caution. Manuals included explicit warnings about placement, not leaving the appliance unattended, and being careful of cords and connections. But accidents still happened. A moment of distraction, a faulty wire, a curious child, or simply placing the hot toaster in the wrong spot could lead to trouble. The materials, while chosen for their heat and electrical properties, also contributed to the safety profile. Metal was necessary for the structure and heat radiation, but it conducted heat and electricity. Ceramic was crucial for insulation, but ceramic can be brittle and might crack if the toaster was dropped or handled roughly, potentially compromising safety. The exposed nature of the elements on open rack designs, while necessary for direct toasting, also meant a burn hazard was always present. Early 20th century domestic electric heating appliances, including toasters with their exposed elements and conductive metal bodies, presented notable safety risks compared to modern standards. The primary hazards included fire, often due to lack of automatic shutoff and proximity to flammable materials, and electric shock, stemming from rudimentary insulation, wiring, and a lack of robust safety regulations. This is our mainstream historical fact, outlining the key dangers. A quirky tidbit about early toaster safety involves some of the unusual warnings or anecdotal incidents. Some early appliance manuals included stern advice about never immersing the toaster in water for cleaning, which seems obvious now, but perhaps wasn't to everyone used to washing dishes. There are anecdotes of toasters starting small kitchen fires due to being left on or placed too close to curtains. Imagine reading a manual that says, "Warning, may ignite your tablecloth if used incorrectly. Do not leave unsupervised for acts of spontaneous combustion." There's joke number one, our new electric toaster. It's revolutionizing breakfast and occasionally home insurance claims. Historians debate the level of public awareness and manufacturer responsibility regarding the electrical and fire safety risks associated with these early domestic heating appliances. How well did the general public understand the new dangers posed by electricity and high-temperature appliances compared to their familiarity with fire and gas? Did manufacturers adequately inform users of the dangers through clear warnings and instructions? Or was safety less prioritized in design and marketing compared to function, convenience, and novelty? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, examining who bore the most responsibility for safety in this new electric age. Navigating the use of early electric toasters required vigilance and caution. They were exciting new tools, but they demanded respect for the power they wielded and the heat they generated. Joke number two. You unplug the hot toaster carefully. Safety first, right after toast. The gentle revolution of convenience also brought new risks into the home kitchen. Joke number three. You look at the glowing element. So much power. Potentially for perfectly browned toast, potentially for minor conflagrations. Exciting. You've explored the design evolution of the manual flip toasters, seen how they fit into the kitchen, and learned about the safety considerations. Despite the improvements with hinged sides and cages, the main inconvenience remained: you still had to watch the bread and manually flip it, and there was no automatic shutoff. This meant your attention was required from start to finish, but the desire for even more convenience, for a toaster that could handle the process itself, was growing, leading inventors to work on the next big leap: automation. The goal was a toaster that would require less user intervention, a toaster that could heat the bread for the right amount of time, ideally toast both sides without manual flipping, and, most importantly, turn itself off before the bread caught fire. This required the development of new mechanisms that went beyond simple mechanical aids for flipping. inventors began experimenting with ways to incorporate timing and automatic action into the toaster design. One key area was developing reliable timers. These weren't electronic timers like today, but mechanical ones, spring-loaded mechanisms that, once set or started, would run for a predetermined period and then trigger an action, usually cutting off the electrical current to the heating element. This meant you could set the approximate toasting time and walk away, trusting the toaster to turn itself off, even if the bread stayed in place. Sensory details the faint ticking sound of a mechanical timer, the click as the timer mechanism reaches the end, and the glowing element fades. Another focus was on automating the flipping or turning process. While the hinged sides helped with manual flipping, the ultimate goal was a toaster that could toast both sides without you having to touch the bread at all. This led to designs with internal racks or cages that could somehow be manipulated automatically. Some designs involved rotating the bread within the toaster. Others involved flipping the entire cage or rack. Early concepts even explored ways to perhaps toast both sides simultaneously. The ultimate outcome of these efforts, though perhaps slightly beyond the strict early 20th century scope for widespread adoption, was the invention of the automatic pop-up toaster, famously patented by Charles Strite in 1921 and later refined. This design incorporated slots to drop the bread into solving the need for flipping entirely, and a timer mechanism that not only shut off the element, but also physically ejected the finished toast. But the manual flip toaster era saw the crucial steps towards this: the development of the timing and automatic movement mechanisms. Imagine the ingenuity in developing these early timing devices, intricate clockwork or thermal mechanisms that could reliably measure minutes and trigger a switch in a hot, electrical environment, and the mechanical cleverness in devising ways to move the bread automatically within the confines of the toaster, following the manual flip designs. The early 20th century saw significant inventive effort focused on automating the toasting process, including the development of mechanical timers to control toasting duration and various mechanisms designed to automatically turn or move the bread, paving the way for the eventual invention of the automatic pop-up toaster. This is our mainstream historical fact, highlighting the transition to automation. A quirky tidbit about these early automation attempts involves some of the less successful or more complex transitional designs before the pop-up became standard. There were toasters patented that featured elaborate rotating racks that would turn the bread slowly, or complex lever systems that would attempt to flip the bread within a chamber. Some involved setting multiple dials or winding springs in specific ways. Imagine a toaster that looked like a clockwork puzzle box with wires and levers, all just to turn your toast automatically. There's joke number one: yes, it automates the flip. Just requires winding this spring, setting these 3 gears, and aligning the celestial bodies. Historians debate the primary technical hurdle in the transition from manual flip toasters to fully automatic ones. Was the biggest challenge developing a reliable and accurate mechanical timer that could withstand the heat and electrical environment? Was it designing a functional and durable mechanical ejection or flipping mechanism that worked consistently? Or was the true innovation in sensing when the toast was done to achieve consistent browning, regardless of the bread type or starting temperature, which the earliest timers couldn't do? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, dissecting the engineering challenges of achieving true toast automation. These developments marked a significant shift in focus, from simply providing electric heat to actively controlling the toasting process. It meant that the manual flip toaster, while a major step up from fire, was already seen as something to be improved upon, leading towards the goal of hands-free toasting. Joke number 2. You look at a manual flip toaster next to a diagram of an automatic one. So, I don't have to watch it. It just does it, witchcraft? The development of timers and automatic mechanisms in toasters during this era was a quiet but crucial phase, transforming the appliance from one requiring constant user attention to one that was gradually becoming more independent. Joke number 3. You imagine a manual flip toaster sighing? My days are numbered. Soon, the machines will flip for themselves. These innovations laid the essential groundwork for the pop-up toaster, which would eventually bring automated toast to the masses and truly cement the toaster's place as a staple of the modern kitchen. You've explored the development of timers and mechanisms, seeing the crucial steps taken towards automating the toasting process, moving beyond the simple manual flip. Despite the safety concerns and limitations of these early electric toasters, their development, refinement, and adoption, even in this relatively basic manual form, represented a significant shift. This gentle revolution wasn't just about inventing a new appliance, it was about changing expectations, paving the way for the automated convenience that was just around the corner. The manual flip toasters, even with their later hinged sides and cages, highlighted the remaining inconvenience, the need for constant human attention and manual action. This wasn't a failure of the toaster, it was a demonstration of the next problem to be solved by inventors. The very experience of having an electric toaster that required you to stand there and flip was the user feedback that spurred the drive towards automation. People had tasted the convenience of electric heat, and now they wanted more. They wanted their toast made with minimal intervention. The experiments with timers and automated mechanisms that we discussed weren't happening in a vacuum. They were a direct response to the reality of using the manual flip toasters. Engineers and inventors saw the potential for improvement. They worked on making those mechanical timers reliable and accurate. They brainstormed ways for the bread to be turned or ejected automatically, eliminating the need for you to open a hot cage or reach in with a fork. These developments, occurring throughout the early decades of the 20th century, show a clear progression of innovation. The manual flip toaster, while commercially successful and revolutionary in its own right, was a stepping stone. It proved the concept of electric toasting and created a market for countertop convenience. But its limitations spurred the next wave of invention. Modern aside, it's like how early mobile phones proved the concept of portable communication and created a market. But their limitations spurred the development of smartphones. The earlier version was necessary to get to the later, more convenient one. The challenges of these early toasters, inconsistency in browning, risk of burning if unattended directly linked to the lack of automation, the manual handling of hot bread, were the problems that the next generation of toasters sought to solve. The drive towards automation was fueled by the desire for more consistent results and greater safety and convenience. A toaster that timed itself and turned itself off was inherently safer than one that would just keep heating until you unplugged it or it caught fire. This period saw a proliferation of patents and experimental designs exploring different ways to achieve automation. Some tried complex mechanical linkages to flip the bread. Others focused solely on reliable thermal or clockwork timers. The concept of the vertical slot toaster, where bread dropped down and was lifted up, simplifying the handling process and lending itself well to automation, began to gain prominence. The experience and limitations of early manual flip electric toasters directly fueled the next phase of innovation, driving the development of mechanical timers and automated mechanisms throughout the early 20th century, which aimed to reduce user intervention and eventually led to the invention of the automatic pop-up toaster. This is our mainstream historical fact, outlining the causal link between the manual era and the push for automation. A quirky tidbit about this transition involves some of the stopgap solutions or user habits that highlighted the need for automation. People would sometimes use external timers or even simple hourglasses placed next to the toaster to remind themselves when to flip or turn it off. Manufacturers might print recommended toasting times in manuals E.g.g. Toast each side for approximately 2 minutes. Acknowledging the manual timing required. Imagine setting a small sand timer every time you want to toast. There's joke number 1. My morning routine. Wake up, make coffee, set the toast timer. The tiny sand one, obviously. Historians debate how quickly the concept of full automation, meaning dropping bread in and getting finished toast out without further intervention, became the widely accepted goal for toaster design after the initial success of manual models. Was the focus initially just on adding a shut-off timer for safety? Or was the ambition for a fully hands-free experience present from the moment the limitations of manual flipping became clear? This is our open, scholarly debate phrase. understanding the timeline and scope of the ambition for automated toasting. The manual flip toaster, for all its simplicity and its demands on user attention, was the necessary precursor. It introduced electric heat for toasting to the home, proved its viability, and highlighted exactly what features were needed in the next iteration. It created the desire for something better. Joke number 2. You imagine a manual flip toaster watching a prototype automatic one being demonstrated. Show off. I walked so you could, well, automatically move bread. The gradual development of timing and automation mechanisms during this era was a quiet revolution happening alongside the more visible adoption of electric appliances. It was the process of refining a new technology, making it more convenient, safer, and less demanding on the user. Joke number 3. You picture an inventor adjusting a tiny gear in a timer mechanism? Just a few more turns, and humanity will finally be free from manual toast flipping. The stage was being set for the appliance that would truly define electric toasting for generations to come. You've explored the gradual journey of the electric toaster, from the first manual flip models to the early steps towards automation. The early 20th century saw inventors working to make this humble kitchen appliance increasingly convenient. But that journey culminated, at least for the first major generation of toasters, in a game-changing invention, the automatic pop-up toaster. While experiments with timing and automated bread movement continued, the definitive design leap came with the invention of the toaster that could not only turn itself off, but also physically eject the toast when it was done. This was the holy grail of electric toasting convenience. You put bread in slots, set a timer, or in later models, a browning control, and walked away. The toaster took care of everything, delivering perfectly browned slices without any manual intervention. Charles Strite is generally credited with inventing and patenting the first commercially successful automatic pop-up toaster in 1921. He initially developed the concept for industrial use in restaurants, but the convenience and safety of the design soon made it popular for home use. The basic design principles Strite established are still fundamentally in use in pop-up toasters today. Vertical slots to hold the bread, heating elements on either side, a timer connected to a mechanism that cuts power and springs the bread up when the set time is over. Imagine the wonder of seeing this device in action for the first time. You dropped slices of bread into slots. You set a timer dial, or later, a browning control to your preferred level of toastiness. You pressed a lever or switch, activating the heating elements and engaging the timer. And then, you waited. But unlike with earlier toasters, you didn't have to watch. You could focus on other breakfast tasks, confident that the toaster would manage the toasting and shut itself off. Sensory details the sound of the lever clicking down, the almost magical popping up of the toast, the perfectly even browning on both sides. The pop-up feature was revolutionary. It meant you didn't have to worry about burning your fingers reaching into a hot device. It clearly signaled that the toast was ready. It added an element of visual drama and satisfying clicking and springing sounds to the previously mundane act of making toast. It also added a new layer of safety, further reducing the risk of fire compared to the manual flip models that could be left on indefinitely. This invention transformed the electric toaster from a convenient, but still somewhat involved, gadget into a genuinely hands-free appliance. It simplified and automated the toasting process to an unprecedented degree, making toast even more readily available and accessible. It was a tangible realization of the promise of electric convenience, taking the task of making toast and making it virtually effortless. The invention and widespread adoption of the automatic pop-up toaster, largely driven by the innovations of Charles Strite, significantly transformed the process, adding automated timing, shut-off, and physical ejection of the finished toast, and establishing the core design principles that are still in use in modern toasters. This is our mainstream historical fact, highlighting the key invention. A quirky tidbit about this invention involves the potential inspiration. Some accounts suggest that Strite, while working in a factory cafeteria, was frustrated with the inconsistent and often burnt toast produced by early manual electric toasters used there. motivating him to design a better, more automated solution. Imagine a factory worker's burning toast sparking a revolution in kitchen appliance design. There's joke number one: burnt toast, the silent muse of the 20th century. Historians debate the relative influence of domestic use in driving the development and widespread adoption of the automatic pop-up toaster. While Strite initially conceived of it for restaurants, how quickly did the design adapt and become primarily focused on the home market? Did the demand from households seeking breakfast convenience outpace the needs of the food service industry in driving the pop-up toaster's evolution? Or did both sectors contribute significantly and in parallel? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, weighing the different influences on the pop-up's development and spread. The automatic pop-up toaster became an icon of the modern kitchen. It was the endpoint of the first major phase in the development of electric toasters. Taking the process to its logical conclusion, fully automated toast with no manual intervention required. Joke number two: you drop bread into the slots and press the lever. Behold, the future has arrived. I literally do nothing now. It was a small revolution in breakfast, making toast an even more ubiquitous and effortless part of the morning meal. Joke number three: you imagine explaining the pop-up feature to someone from the past? It spits the toast out at you. You don't even have to touch it. And now, as our journey through the history of the electric toaster comes to a close, you can hear the faint click of the timer mechanism, the gentle hum of the nichrome heating element, the satisfying pop as the toast is ejected. The smell of perfectly browned bread fills the air. It's the sound of convenience, the sound of a revolution in breakfast. The history of this humble appliance, from manual flipping to automated popping, is a testament to the power of invention to change even the simplest of daily tasks. Slowly and steadily, sweet dreams